At 8:15 a.m. on September 17, 1944, Sergeant Clarence Smoyer watched through the sight of his M4 Sherman tank as it advanced along a muddy road near Arracourt, France. 300 meters away, partially hidden behind a stone fence, was something that looked like a sewer pipe mounted on tracks. The veteran crew laughed nervously. Was that the dreaded German Panther? It looked like an unfinished project, disproportionate, almost ridiculous. But that sewer pipe was the 75mm KWK-42L/70 cannon, the deadliest anti-tank weapon of World War II. And in the next 30 seconds, it would transform 15 Sherman tanks into metal furnaces where 52 men would burn alive, screaming for help as internal ammunition exploded. What began as American mockery would become one of the fastest and most brutal armored massacres of the war in Europe. The Panzer V Panther was designed in 1942 as the German response to the Soviet T-34. But while the T-34 prioritized mobility and mass production, German engineers created something different, a mobile fortress equipped with a cannon capable of piercing any Allied armor at absurd distances. The KWK-42 fired armor-piercing shells at 935 meters per second, with enough kinetic energy to penetrate 140 millimeters of steel at 1,000 meters. For comparison, the M4 Sherman had frontal armor of only 51 millimeters, and its 75 mm gun could only penetrate German armor at distances of less than 500 meters. It was a catastrophic technical disadvantage. General George Patton knew this, but he was limited by logistics. The American Army produced Shermans en masse because they were cheap, reliable, and easy to transport. In September 1944, for every German Panther, there were 10 Shermans on the battlefield. The American strategy was simple and brutal: accept the losses and overwhelm the Panthers with superior numbers. But this meant Sherman crews were sent into battle knowing they were at a deadly technical disadvantage. Soldier Belton Cooper of the 3rd Armored Division wrote, "We called our Shermans death traps. We all knew that against a Panther or Tiger, our chance of survival was minimal." The problem wasn't just the inferior armor. The Sherman used gasoline, unlike German tanks which use diesel. Gasoline is highly flammable, and when a German shell penetrated the Sherman's hull, it frequently ignited the fuel tanks. Furthermore, Sherman ammunition was stored without adequate protection inside the crew compartment. A penetration usually meant an immediate explosion followed by fire. British crews nicknamed the Sherman the Ronson, a reference to the lighter brand whose slogan was "Light's first time, every time." The Germans called it the Tommy Cooker. Military statistics showed that 60 to 80% of hit Shermans caught fire immediately. And escaping a burning tank took precious time that most crews did not have. On September 12, 1944, the American 4th Armored Division received orders to advance through the Lorraine region of France and establish a bridgehead across the Moselle River. Military intelligence reported moderate German resistance with few enemy tanks in the area. This information was outdated and fatally incorrect. The German 5th Panzer Division had arrived overnight with 262 tanks, including 89 Panthers. Combat Command A of the 4th Armored, consisting of 47 Shermans, advanced on the morning of September 17 toward the small town of Arracourt. The terrain was open, farmland with small woods and stone fences. It was perfect for tank ambushes. But the Americans didn't know that 3 platoons of Panthers were positioned in a crescent, hidden behind natural elevations and rural buildings. At 8:12 a.m., Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams was leading the American column when he received reports of unidentified vehicles ahead. Abrams ordered combat formation and a cautious advance. The Shermans spread out in a line, maintaining a distance of 50 meters between each vehicle. That was when Sergeant Smoyer spotted the first Panther. It looked disproportionate, he would later report. The cannon was too long, as if someone had welded a sewer pipe onto the tank. The platoon commander, Lieutenant Peterson, ordered immediate fire. 3 Shermans fired simultaneously. The shells bounced off the Panther's sloped frontal armor without causing damage. It was then that the German commander, Hauptmann Franz Bake, gave the order as 14 Panthers were waiting for, fewer free fire. What happened in the next 30 seconds would be described by survivors as an organized massacre. The first German shell hit Lieutenant Peterson's Sherman at a distance of 740 meters. The armor-piercing round tore through the frontal armor, penetrated the ammunition compartment, and detonated 75 stored 75mm shells inside the tank. The explosion ripped the turret off the hull and launched Peterson's body 15 meters into the air. The other 4 crew members died instantly. 2 seconds later, a second Sherman exploded in the same way. Panic set in among the Americans. The Shermans tried to retreat, but their gasoline-powered engines left visible smoke trails that gave away their positions. The German Panthers, with superior Zeiss optical sights and more precise rangefinders, continued firing methodically. Every shot was calculated. Every shot hit home. In 15 seconds, 8 Shermans were in flames. Soldier Eugene Luciano was inside the 5th Sherman hit. He survived and described it. "I heard a loud metallic sound, like a giant bell being struck. Then everything turned orange and red. The heat was instantly unbearable. My fellow gunner started screaming, his clothes were on fire. I tried to open the hatch, but it was stuck. I managed to force it after what felt like hours but was actually seconds. I got out and rolled on the ground. My skin was melting." Inside the burning tanks, temperatures reached 1000 degrees Celsius in less than 10 seconds. The ammunition cooked off and exploded in sequence, creating waves of secondary explosions. Crewmen who didn't die in the initial penetration desperately tried to escape through the hatches, but the procedure took time. The commander's hatch was on the turret, the driver's in the front, and the gunner's underneath. In normal conditions, evacuating a Sherman took 8 to 12 seconds. But with the tank in flames, toxic smoke filling the interior, comrades screaming, and ammunition exploding, that time doubled or tripled. Many crewmen were trapped when the hatch mechanisms fused from the heat. Others managed to get partially out but were caught at the waist while the fire consumed them. Sergeant Smoyer managed to reverse in time, hiding his Sherman behind a barn. From there, he watched helplessly as 7 more Shermans were destroyed. "The screams," he said decades later in an interview, "you never forget the screams. They were men I knew, men I had coffee with that morning. And they were burning alive inside metal boxes, and there was nothing we could do." The attack lasted exactly 94 seconds from the first shot to the last. 15 Shermans destroyed, 52 men dead, 17 seriously injured. The German Panthers remained in their positions, virtually untouched. Only one Panther was damaged by a lucky shot that hit its tracks. The rest of the American column retreated in total panic, leaving the burning tanks and the bodies behind. Combat Command A regrouped 3 kilometers away. Of the 47 Shermans that began the advance, 33 were still operational. But morale was destroyed. Crews refused to go back. Colonel Abrams had to threaten court-martial before the tanks returned to combat. That night, he wrote in his personal diary, "I sent boys to be slaughtered in sardine cans against mobile fortresses. It isn't war, it's institutionalized murder." The Battle of Arracourt continued for 10 more days. In total, the 4th Armored Division lost 87 Shermans. The Germans lost 86 Panthers, but the difference was stark. In the Shermans, 281 men burned to death. In the Panthers, 104 crewmen died, mostly from running out of ammunition or mechanical problems, not fires. The difference between the designs was life or death. After Arracourt, the American Army finally accelerated production of the Jumbo Sherman, a version with reinforced armor, and the British Sherman Firefly equipped with a more powerful 76mm gun. But they were too few, too late. Most American crews fought until the end of the war in standard, technically inferior Shermans, knowing that every encounter with a Panther or Tiger could be fatal. Franz Bake, the German commander at Arracourt, was decorated with the Knight's Cross with oak leaves. In post-war interrogations, he stated, "The Americans were brave, absurdly brave. But courage doesn't pierce steel. Their tanks were inferior and they knew it. Yet they kept coming. I respected them for that, but my job was to kill them, and the Panther made that terribly easy." Sergeant Clarence Smoyer survived the war. In his autobiography Spearhead, published in 2019, he wrote about that day in Arracourt. The sound of men burning alive haunted me for 75 years. I still wake up hearing the screams. I still see the tanks exploding. The worst part is knowing those deaths were avoidable. We had the resources to build better tanks. We chose not to. We chose quantity over quality. And men paid the price. American military records show that during the entire European campaign, from June 1944 to May 1945, approximately 6,200 Shermans were destroyed in combat. Of these, about 4,100 caught fire after being hit. Conservative estimates calculate that between 3,000 and 4,500 American crewmen burned to death inside their tanks, many while desperately trying to escape. The Panther remained devastating until the end of the war. Its kill ratio was 4 to 5 Allied tanks destroyed for every Panther lost. However, Germany only produced 6,000 Panthers. The United States produced 49,234 Shermans. The American strategy of quantity over quality worked, but it cost thousands of lives that could have been saved with better technology. The fields of Arracourt today are peaceful, covered in crops of wheat and corn. But in September 1944, they were the scene of one of the worst armored massacres of the war. In the first 30 seconds of combat, 15 Shermans turned into furnaces, and 52 men screamed for help as they burned alive. The sewer pipe mocked by the Americans proved to be the difference between life and death, between victory and massacre. And for the families of those 52 men, the mockery cost everything.